The wind cuts across the Llano Estacado like a blade. You're lying on hard ground, no tent, no walls, nothing between you and the vast, indifferent sky except a thin bedroll and the knowledge that hostile riders could appear on the horizon at any moment. How do you sleep? How does anyone sleep like this? This is the question that haunted the Texas Rangers for over a century. And the answer isn't about courage or stubbornness. It's about a system so perfectly integrated with the landscape, with human physiology, with mathematics and geography, that it made the impossible feel almost inevitable. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand exactly how these men turned vulnerability into an advantage, and why that same principle still matters today. Imagine this, it's 1840. You're a ranger, maybe 25 years old, riding deep into Comanche territory. Your horse is exhausted, you're exhausted. The nearest fort is 40 miles behind you. Ahead, nothing but scrubland, arroyos, and the constant threat of ambush. The sun is dropping below the horizon. Your heart is pounding. You need to sleep. You need it desperately. But sleep feels like suicide. Here's what most people assume. Rangers just toughed it out. They drank whiskey, gritted their teeth, and somehow forced themselves to rest despite the danger. Romantic, right? And yet it's wrong, completely wrong. The Rangers didn't overcome the fear of sleep. They engineered it away. Nothing worked in isolation. That's the first principle you need to understand. The Rangers' sleeping system wasn't about one brilliant technique. It was about how 5 or 6 different elements, positioning, timing, rotation, our geography, animal behavior, and human biology, locked together into something that felt less like rest and more like a controlled form of vulnerability that actually kept you alive. Let's start with the most obvious part, where they slept. The Texas Rangers didn't sleep in random locations. They chose specific terrain features with almost mathematical precision. They looked for arroyos, those shallow, eroded gullies that cut through the prairie. From above, an arroyo looks like a scar in the landscape. From inside one, you're invisible. Your silhouette doesn't break the horizon. A rider passing at night, or even during the day at a distance, wouldn't see you. The arroyo became your wall without requiring you to build anything. But here's where it gets interesting. The arroyo alone wasn't enough. Our Rangers understood something about the psychology of danger that modern security experts still study. The human brain doesn't sleep well when it feels exposed. So they didn't just lie down in the bottom of an arroyo. They positioned themselves at a specific angle, head slightly elevated, feet toward the opening, body angled so that even in deep sleep, their eyes would naturally drift toward the direction of greatest threat. This wasn't conscious. It was trained into them. The body remembers danger. Now, the ground itself. Imagine lying on packed earth, rocks digging into your ribs, the cold seeping up through your back. Most people think Rangers just endured this, but they didn't. They used a technique that sounds absurdly simple. They lay on their saddle blankets, folded in a specific way. That the blanket wasn't just comfort, it was insulation. It separated them from the cold ground, which meant their core temperature didn't plummet during the night. A body that's too cold wakes up constantly. A body at the right temperature sleeps deeper, even in danger. The saddle itself became a pillow, not comfortable, but functional. And here's the part that still gets me. Rangers understood that comfort and safety were sometimes enemies. A soft bed invites deep sleep. Deep sleep in enemy territory is death. So they chose discomfort deliberately. The hard saddle, the thin blanket, the rocky ground, these weren't failures of supply. They were features. They kept the Rangers in a state of lighter sleep, what modern sleep researchers call stage 2 sleep, where you're rested enough to function but alert enough to react. But positioning and comfort are only part of the equation. The real genius was in rotation and timing. Rangers never slept alone. They traveled in small groups, usually 3 to 5 men, and they developed a system that sounds simple but required absolute discipline. They rotated watch duty in shifts that aligned with natural sleep cycles and threat patterns. Think about this. The most dangerous hours aren't random. They're predictable. Most ambushes happen in the hour before dawn, when the light is just starting to change, when a ranger's eyes are adjusting and his mind is foggy. Rangers knew this, so they structured their night so that the most alert man, the one who'd slept first and deepest, would be on watch during those critical hours. The rotation went like this. First man sleeps for 3 hours, takes watch for 2. Second man sleeps while first man watches, then takes over. Third man does the same. By the time the cycle repeats, the first man has had 2 separate sleep sessions, totaling maybe 5 hours, but broken into chunks that actually restore function. This is where the system starts to show its genius. Nothing worked in isolation. The positioning kept them alert. The discomfort kept them from sleeping too deeply. The rotation ensured that at least one man was always genuinely awake and sharp. And the timing of the rotation meant that the most dangerous hours had the most alert guard. But there's more. The landscape itself was part of the system. Rangers didn't just choose arroyos randomly. They chose locations based on water sources. A dry arroyo near a creek meant they could water their horses without moving camp. Horses that are watered and fed sleep better, and they also serve as an early warning system. A horse will sense approaching riders long before a human will. Rangers understood this. They positioned themselves so their horses were between them and the most likely approach route. If riders came from that direction, the horses would spook and the Rangers would wake. The horses became part of the security system. Nothing worked in isolation. The positioning, the rotation, the terrain, the animals, all of it was one integrated machine. Now here's where it gets almost brutal in its logic. Rangers understood that sleep deprivation was cumulative, but they also understood that you can't fix it all at once. So they built in recovery nights. Every few days when they reached a more secure location, a ranch, a fort, on a settlement, Rangers would sleep for 10, sometimes 12 hours straight. This wasn't laziness, it was maintenance. The body was a tool, and tools need maintenance. They'd learned through hard experience that a man who's chronically sleep-deprived makes mistakes. Mistakes in enemy territory are fatal. But here's the part that separates Rangers from other frontier fighters. They understood the mathematics of rest. A man on 4 hours of broken sleep, properly positioned and alert, is more dangerous than a man on 8 hours of deep sleep in a safe bed. Why? Because the 4-hour man is primed. His adrenaline is managed. His reflexes are sharp. The 8-hour man is groggy, disoriented, slow to react. Rangers trained themselves to operate in that 4-hour state. It became normal. Their nervous systems adapted. The psychological component is where most people miss the real story. Rangers didn't sleep despite the danger. They slept because of it. The danger itself became a tool. The knowledge that enemies might be close, that vigilance was necessary, that sleep was a privilege earned through positioning and rotation. This created a kind of focused rest. Modern sleep researchers call it polyphasic sleep, but rangers had discovered it centuries before science had a name for it. Think about what this means. A ranger lying in an arroyo on a saddle blanket with his horse nearby and a partner on watch wasn't experiencing the same kind of sleep as someone in a bed. His brain was in a different state. Part of it was sleeping, part of it was monitoring. This wasn't insomnia. It was a trained response. The brain can be taught to partition itself, to rest some systems while keeping others on alert. And then there's the element that ties everything together: trust. A ranger could only sleep if he trusted his partner completely. If there was doubt, if he thought his partner might fall asleep on watch or might not wake him if danger came, the whole system collapsed. So rangers trained together for years. They knew each other's patterns, their reliability, their instincts. This trust wasn't sentimental. It was operational. It was what made the system work. The equipment itself reinforced this. Rangers carried minimal gear: a bedroll, a saddle blanket, a canteen, a rifle, nothing extra. Why? Because extra weight meant extra fatigue, and fatigue meant poor sleep. The system was designed to eliminate every unnecessary variable. Every ounce of gear had to justify itself. This forced a kind of clarity. You brought what you needed to survive and fight. Everything else was a liability. Here's the worst part, and the part that still resonates. Rangers understood that they might not wake up. They might be killed in their sleep. They accepted this. And that acceptance, that willingness to be vulnerable in a controlled way, was what made the system work. They weren't trying to achieve perfect safety. Perfect safety was impossible. They were trying to achieve the best possible balance between rest and alertness, given the constraints of their situation. The terrain of Texas itself became part of the sleeping strategy. The Llano Estacado, the Edwards Plateau, the brush country of South Texas. Each region had different threat patterns. Rangers adapted their sleeping system to each landscape. In the Llano, where you could see for miles, they'd position themselves differently than in the brush country, where ambush was easier, but visibility was limited. They'd learned the land so thoroughly that they could read it like a map, and they'd position themselves accordingly. What's remarkable is that this system persisted for over 100 years. From the 1820s through the early 1900s, rangers were using essentially the same techniques. Why? Because it worked. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't comfortable, but it allowed men to function in one of the most hostile environments on the continent, to sleep in the middle of enemy territory, and to wake up alive. The system was so effective that it influenced how other frontier forces operated. Cavalry units adopted similar rotation patterns. Scouts learned similar positioning techniques. The Rangers had essentially solved a problem that seemed unsolvable: how to rest while remaining ready for violence. And they'd done it not through superhuman willpower, but through understanding how the human body works, how the landscape can be used, how animals behave, and how systems integrate. But here's what connects this to today. We've forgotten how to sleep like this. We've built walls and locks and security systems, and we've outsourced our vigilance to technology. We sleep in safety, but we sleep poorly. Anxiety disorders, insomnia, sleep apnea, these are epidemic in modern life. And part of the reason is that we've lost the ability to trust our environment and our people. We're trying to achieve perfect safety, which is impossible, so we lie awake worrying. Rangers understood something we've lost: vulnerability. When properly managed and integrated into a system, can actually be restful. Not comfortable, but restful. They didn't fight the danger. They incorporated it. They built a system where danger was acknowledged, managed, and used as a tool for maintaining alertness. The Rangers' sleeping system was an engineering marvel, but not in the way we usually think about engineering. It wasn't about building something. It was about understanding limits, about losing less sleep, less vulnerability, less risk, through perfect integration of human physiology, landscape, animal behavior, and social trust. Nothing worked in isolation. Everything depended on everything else. And that's the real lesson. In a world where we're constantly trying to maximize comfort and minimize risk, the Rangers remind us that sometimes the best systems are the ones that acknowledge danger, embrace controlled vulnerability, and build everything else around that foundation. They slept in the middle of enemy territory not because they were fearless, but because they'd built a system where fear could be useful. If you want to understand how the frontier actually worked, not the mythology, but the real mechanics of survival and strategy, subscribe. We dive into the systems that built America, the ones that still shape how we think about risk, trust, and resilience. See you next time.